Welcome back to the channel, everyone, and a warm thank you to all the new viewers who are joining us today, because what you are about to hear might completely change the way you look at the smallest coin in your pocket. Today we are diving deep into one of the most mysterious and talked about Lincoln cents ever imagined, the 1962 no-mint mark 1 cent from the United States, a coin that on the surface looks ordinary, plain, and almost forgettable, yet under the right circumstances has been whispered about in collector circles as a penny that could reach an almost unbelievable value of up to $25 million. So settle in, keep your eyes open, and let your curiosity take over as we explore how a simple copper cent from the early 1960s could become a once-in-a-lifetime treasure due to rare errors, unusual mint mistakes, and extraordinary possibilities that transform pocket change into legendary wealth. Because the story of the 1962 no-mint mark penny is not just about metal and dates, but about accidents, timing, human error, history, and the slim chance that one tiny coin slipped through the system carrying a fortune on its back. The year 1962 places this coin firmly in the pre-zinc era of U.S. pennies, meaning it was struck primarily in a bronze alloy of copper, tin, and zinc, a composition that collectors already admire for its classic feel, warm color, and historical weight. And because this coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, it carries no mint mark, which at first glance seems unremarkable but actually opens the door to some of the most extreme and valuable error scenarios imaginable. During this period, the U.S. Mint was producing billions of pennies to meet the demands of a growing economy, and with that immense volume came stress on dies, hurried production schedules, and opportunities for mistakes that today fuel million-dollar dreams. One of the most powerful possibilities that could elevate a 1962 no-mint mark cent into the $25 million range is the existence of a transitional metal error. Because while 1962 officially used bronze planchets, the mint environment always contains remnants from previous and experimental runs, and if a 1962 penny were somehow struck on an unauthorized or wrong-year planchet, such as a silver-based experimental blank, an aluminum test planchet, or even a foreign alloy mistakenly fed into the presses, the result would be a coin that defies official records and instantly becomes a unique specimen. Collectors place astronomical value on coins that should not exist according to mint documentation, and when a coin contradicts history itself, its price can skyrocket beyond conventional limits. Another possibility that drives the $25 million valuation narrative is a dramatic and unmistakable double die obverse or reverse error. Not the common minor doubling that many people mistake for damage, but a bold, sculptural doubling created when the die itself was impressed twice at slightly different angles during its creation, producing strong separation in the date, the word liberty, the motto "I in God we trust," or the lettering on the reverse. And if such a double die were discovered on a 1962 no-mint mark cent with extreme clarity and minimal wear, it would instantly be considered one of the finest error cents ever found. Especially if only one or two examples were known. Rarity combined with visual impact is the lifeblood of high-end numismatics, and the more dramatic and undeniable the error, the higher the bidding climbs. Then there is the breathtaking potential of a wrong denomination strike, an error so rare that it borders on myth, where a penny design is struck onto a blank intended for a different coin entirely, such as a dime, or even a foreign denomination. And if a 1962 Lincoln cent design were found struck on a planchet of the wrong size, thickness, or metal, especially one never officially paired with that design, it would instantly become a numismatic anomaly of the highest order. Collectors and museums would fight for ownership because such coins represent a perfect storm of mistakes that almost never escape the mint. Adding to this is the possibility of a mule error, where the obverse die of a Lincoln cent is paired with a reverse die never meant to go with it, such as a design from another denomination, another year, or even another country. If experimental dies were present, mule errors are among the most coveted mistakes in coin collecting because they demonstrate a complete breakdown in quality control, and if such a mule involved a 1962 no-mint mark penny, the value would not be constrained by price guides but instead driven by auction room frenzy and billionaire collectors eager to own something truly one of a kind. The $25 million figure also finds justification in the hypothetical discovery of a proof-style strike never authorized for circulation. Imagine a 1962 no-mint mark Pennies struck with mirrored fields and razor-sharp devices using polished dies, yet lacking any official proof designation. Such a coin could indicate an unauthorized or experimental proof strike accidentally released, and the existence of a single confirmed example would shake the numismatic world because it would suggest secret or undocumented mint activity, a topic that fascinates collectors and historians alike. Another avenue of extreme value lies in major off-metal strikes combined with pristine condition, such as a penny struck on a thick copper planchet resulting in a dramatically heavier coin, or a broad strike with no retaining collar that expands the design outward while maintaining full detail. Errors like these become exponentially more valuable when paired with flawless surfaces, full red color, and no circulation wear, because condition amplifies rarity, and rarity fuels price. Then there is the controversial but tantalizing idea of a 1962 penny struck using an experimental die hub that was never approved for mass production, resulting in subtle but unmistakable design differences, such as altered letter spacing, unusual portrait details, or reversed elements. And if such a coin were authenticated by top grading services as a unique hub variety, it could redefine what collectors thought they knew about early 1960s mint operations, pushing its value into territory normally reserved for the most famous coins in American history. The story grows even more intense when you consider the possibility of a dramatic mint error surviving untouched for decades, hidden in a roll, a drawer, or an inherited collection, because coins that remain undiscovered develop an almost mythical aura, and when they finally emerge, they arrive not just as objects but as revelations, shocking the market and rewriting price expectations overnight. The reason a figure as high as $25 million becomes conceivable is not because every 1962 penny is valuable, but because the right combination of unauthorized metal, extreme error, absolute uniqueness, and pristine preservation creates a coin that cannot be replaced, duplicated, or even fully explained. Collectors at the highest level are not simply buying coins, they are buying stories, mysteries, and status, owning something that no one else on earth can own. And when two or more ultra-wealthy collectors compete for such a piece, logic gives way to desire and prices can explode beyond any rational framework. It is also important to understand that Philadelphia mint coins without mint marks often receive less attention at first, allowing rare errors to slip through unnoticed, which paradoxically increases their chances of survival. And over time, as knowledge grows and authentication methods improve, coins once dismissed as oddities become recognized as treasures, fueling sensational valuations. The 1962 no-mint mark penny sits at the crossroads of high mintage and high potential, making it the perfect candidate for a legendary error discovery. And while most examples are worth only a small premium, the idea that one could exist with a combination of multiple errors, such as a double die struck on the wrong metal with proof-like surfaces, ignites the imagination of collectors worldwide. This is why people continue to check old penny jars, inherited collections, and forgotten rolls. Because history has shown again and again that the most valuable coins often start as ordinary change, overlooked and underestimated, until the right eyes recognize their significance. And that is what makes the 1962 no-mint mark 1 cent such a powerful symbol of hidden wealth. It reminds us that mistakes can create miracles, that accidents can become masterpieces, and that sometimes the smallest objects carry the biggest surprises. So as you listen to this story and think about the pennies you may have passed over 1,000 times, remember that value is not always obvious. Sometimes it is buried in errors, sealed in metal, and waiting patiently for the moment when the world finally realizes what it has been holding all along. Next, 1979 no-mint mark 1 cent. Once again we are about to journey into the unbelievable world where ordinary pocket change collides with extraordinary value. Today our focus is on a coin that most people have spent without a second thought, ignored in jars, dropped into tip cups, or tossed into drawers. The 1979 no-mint mark 1 cent from the United States, a penny that appears common, modern, and unremarkable, yet under extremely rare circumstances has been talked about as a coin that could reach a staggering value of up to $17 million. And while that number may sound impossible at first, by the time you reach the end of this story you will understand how errors, mint mistakes, transitional periods, and sheer numismatic mystery can elevate a simple copper-colored cent into the realm of legendary collectibles. The year 1979 sits at a fascinating crossroads in U.S. coinage history, a time when the mint was under massive pressure to produce billions of cents for circulation, while simultaneously dealing with metal cost concerns, experimental compositions, worn equipment, and rapidly changing quality control standards. And because this coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, it carries no mint mark, a detail that quietly places it in the heart of the highest production volumes in the country, where the chances for unnoticed mistakes were greatest. The 1979 penny was officially struck using a copper-plated zinc planchet, a composition introduced earlier in the decade to reduce costs, consisting of a zinc core coated with a thin layer of copper. And while this change was meant to be uniform and efficient, it opened the door to some of the most dramatic and valuable error possibilities the modern cent series has ever known. One of the most powerful scenarios that could push a 1979 no-mint mark cent toward the $17 million valuation is the existence of a wrong planchet error involving a solid bronze or experimental copper alloy blank. Because although bronze cents were officially discontinued before 1979, the mint environment is not a perfectly sealed laboratory. Leftover planchets, test blanks, and foreign alloy strips can then have found their way into presses at different times in history. And if a 1979 Lincoln cent were discovered struck on a full bronze planchet instead of the standard copper-plated zinc, especially if authenticated as original and not altered, it would instantly become one of the most important transitional errors ever found, bridging the gap between two eras of American coinage in a way that was never supposed to exist. Collectors place immense value on coins that defy official mint records, and when a coin contradicts what the mint says is possible, the price ceiling effectively disappears. Another scenario that fuels the $17 million legend is a dramatic and unmistakable double die error. Not the minor mechanical doubling that results from loose dies or machine vibration, but a true hub doubling created during the die-making process, resulting in bold, separated lettering and numerals that can be seen clearly without magnification. Imagine a 1979 no-mint mark penny with strong doubling on the date, the word liberty, or the motto "I in God we trust," where the separation is so clear it looks like two impressions frozen in metal. Such a coin would immediately stand out as a showpiece error, and if only one or two examples were known, competition among elite collectors could drive the value into multi-million-dollar territory. Especially if the coin were preserved in near-perfect condition, then there is the breathtaking possibility of a major off-metal strike, where the Lincoln cent design appears on a planchet intended for a completely different denomination, such as a dime, a foreign coin, or even an experimental blank never meant for circulation. Wrong metal strikes are among the most dramatic mint errors because they are visually obvious and mechanically complex, requiring multiple failures in the minting process to occur simultaneously. And if a 1979 no-mint mark cent were found struck on an aluminum planchet, a nickel alloy blank, or another unauthorized metal, the shockwaves through the numismatic community would be immediate and intense. Adding to this is the rare but highly coveted needle error possibility, where the obverse die of a Lincoln cent is paired with a reverse die that does not belong to it, such as a different denomination, an experimental reverse, or an undocumented design. Needle errors are prized because they represent a complete breakdown in mint protocol, and the later the date of the coin, the more astonishing such an error becomes, because modern quality control is assumed to be tighter, making a 1979 needle cent almost unthinkable and therefore extraordinarily valuable. The $17 million valuation also finds support in the potential discovery of an experimental or prototype strike. During the late 1970s, the U.S. Mint was actively researching alternative metals and coatings, testing different thicknesses, bonding techniques, and plating methods, and if a 1979 penny were struck using an experimental copper plating thickness or an unusual bonding process that was never approved for circulation, it could represent a missing chapter in mint history. Especially if documentation is incomplete or lost, coins that serve as physical evidence of undocumented experimentation become historical artifacts as much as collectibles, and museums as well as private collectors would compete aggressively for ownership. Another avenue of extreme value lies in catastrophic mint errors combined with pristine condition, such as a dramatic broad strike with no retaining collar that causes the coin to expand far beyond its normal diameter while retaining full design detail. Or a multi-struck error where the coin was struck several times at different angles, creating a layered and chaotic image that still clearly shows the date and design. These errors become exponentially more valuable when they are visually striking and one of a kind, especially when the coin shows minimal handling and original surfaces, because condition magnifies rarity, and rarity fuels price. Then there is the fascinating possibility of a wrong year die usage, where a die intended for a different year was accidentally used to strike planchets dated 1979, resulting in subtle but significant anomalies in font style, spacing, or design elements. Such a coin would require expert analysis to confirm, but once authenticated it could redefine what collectors know about late 1970s mint operations, pushing its value far beyond conventional guides. The allure of the 1979 no-mint mark cent is further amplified by the fact that most people consider modern pennies worthless, which means rare errors have a higher chance of surviving unnoticed, sitting in collections, jars, or bank rolls for decades, untouched and unexamined, and when such a coin finally emerges, it does so as a revelation, shocking the market and igniting bidding wars that defy expectations. The $17 million figure becomes plausible not because every 1979 penny is valuable, but because the right combination of factors can create a coin that is absolutely unique, undocumented, and irreplaceable. And at the highest levels of collecting, uniqueness outweighs all other considerations. Wealthy collectors are not simply buying metal, they are buying exclusivity, mystery, and the prestige of owning something that no one else can ever possess. History has repeatedly shown that when two or more ultra-wealthy individuals desire the same one-of-a-kind coin, prices can soar to levels that seem irrational to outsiders, but make perfect sense within the world of elite numismatics. The Philadelphia Mint's lack of a mint mark also plays a subtle role in this narrative, because it often leads to less scrutiny at the time of production, allowing anomalies to pass through unnoticed, and decades later those overlooked anomalies become the stars of the collecting world. The 1979 no-mint mark penny represents the idea that even in modern times, when technology and oversight are assumed to be flawless, human error and mechanical failure can still produce miracles. It reminds us that history is not always neat or perfectly recorded, and that sometimes the most valuable stories are written accidentally, in copper and zinc, struck at high speed and forgotten for years, until curiosity brings them back into the light. So as you reflect on this coin and think about the countless pennies you have handled in your lifetime, remember that value is not always obvious. Sometimes it hides in errors, sometimes it waits in plain sight, and sometimes it sits quietly among ordinary coins, carrying a story and a potential fortune that only the most patient and observant will ever discover. Next, 1974 no-mint mark 1 cent from the United States, a penny that most people have held countless times without a second thought, a coin that looks ordinary, common, and almost boring at first glance, yet under extraordinarily rare circumstances has been associated with a jaw-dropping valuation of up to $19 million. A figure that seems unbelievable until you understand the incredible mix of history, minting chaos, transitional metal confusion, and dramatic errors that make this particular year one of the most fascinating in the entire Lincoln Cent series. The year 1974 sits in the middle of one of the most turbulent periods in U.S. coinage history, a time when the rising price of copper was causing serious concern for the U.S. Mint, forcing officials to explore alternatives, test experimental metals, and push production equipment to its limits in order to keep up with demand while controlling costs. And because this coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, it carries no mint mark, placing it at the epicenter of the highest production volume and therefore the greatest opportunity for mistakes to occur unnoticed. Billions of pennies were struck that year, and when production reaches that scale, perfection becomes nearly impossible, which is exactly where the possibility of million-dollar errors is born. Officially, the 1974 penny was supposed to be struck on a copper-plated zinc planchet, the composition introduced earlier in the decade to replace solid bronze cents, but the reality inside the mint was far more complex. Leftover bronze planchets from earlier years, experimental blanks, test strips, and even foreign planchets could coexist in the same environment, creating the perfect storm for wrong planchet errors. And this is where the $19 million legend truly begins. One of the most powerful and widely discussed possibilities is the existence of a 1974 no-mint mark penny struck on a solid bronze planchet instead of the standard copper plated zinc, a transitional error that directly contradicts official mint specifications, because by 1974 bronze cents were not supposed to exist, and yet history has already shown us that impossible coins sometimes do slip through, and when they do, they rewrite the rules of collecting. A genuine 1974 bronze cent authenticated by top experts would instantly rank among the rarest and most important modern U.S. coins ever discovered, especially if it were unique or one of only a handful known, pushing its value far beyond typical era coins and into the realm of legendary status. But the story does not stop there. Another scenario that fuels the $19 million valuation is the possibility of a dramatic double-die obverse or reverse error. Not the weak and misleading machine doubling that many people confuse with true errors, but a bold hub doubling created during the die-making process itself, resulting in strong, separated images in the date, the word liberty, the motto "In God We Trust," or the reverse lettering. A true double die with extreme clarity from 1974 would be a visual masterpiece, immediately recognizable and intensely desirable. And if such a coin were discovered in pristine condition with original surfaces and full detail, collectors would compete fiercely for ownership, especially if only one or two examples were confirmed. Then there is the breathtaking possibility of a wrong metal strike involving an experimental or unauthorized alloy. During the early 1970s, the U.S. Mint conducted extensive testing of alternative materials including aluminum and other lightweight metals. And while most test pieces were supposed to be tightly controlled, history has proven that some experimental strikes escaped into the wild. And if a 1974 no-mint mark Lincoln cent were found struck on an aluminum planchet or another experimental metal never approved for circulation, it would instantly become one of the most important numismatic discoveries of the modern era. Such a coin would not only be valuable as a collectible but also as physical evidence of a hidden chapter in mint history, attracting attention from museums, historians, and elite collectors worldwide. Adding to this is the rare but electrifying possibility of a mule error, where the obverse die of a Lincoln cent is paired with a reverse die that does not belong to it, perhaps from another denomination. An experimental design, or an undocumented reverse variation. Mule errors are among the rarest and most dramatic mint mistakes because they require multiple failures in die handling and quality control. And the later the date of the coin, the more astonishing such an error becomes, because modern mint operations are assumed to be more controlled, making a 1974 mule cent almost unthinkable and therefore extraordinarily valuable. The $19 million figure is also supported by the idea of catastrophic mint errors combined with exceptional preservation, such as a multi-struck coin where the planchet was struck several times at different angles, creating a chaotic yet mesmerizing design that still clearly shows the date and identity of the coin, or a massive broad strike where the retaining collar failed completely, allowing the coin to expand far beyond its normal diameter while retaining sharp detail. These types of errors are already valuable on their own, but when paired with rarity, uniqueness, and near-perfect condition, their value can increase exponentially. Then there is the intriguing possibility of a wrong-year die or experimental hub usage, where a die prepared using an unapproved hub design was accidentally used to strike 1974 cents, resulting in subtle but undeniable differences in lettering style, spacing, or portrait details. Such a discovery would require intense expert study and authentication. But once confirmed, it could redefine what collectors know about mid-1970s mint operations and elevate the coin into a category all its own. What makes the 1974 no-mint mark penny particularly fascinating is that it comes from an era many people consider too modern to produce legendary rarities, which ironically increases the chances that a truly rare error could remain undiscovered for decades, sitting unnoticed in a jar, a drawer, or an inherited collection because no one thought to look closely. And when such a coin finally surfaces, it does not enter the market quietly. It arrives like a thunderclap, shocking collectors and igniting bidding wars that push prices into territory once reserved only for the most famous early American coins. The $19 million valuation becomes plausible not because every 1974 penny is special, but because the right combination of impossible metal, dramatic error, complete uniqueness, and historical mystery can create a coin that simply cannot be replaced. At the highest levels of numismatics, collectors are not buying face value or even metal content, they are buying stories, prestige, and the chance to own something that no one else on earth can ever own. And when two or more ultra-wealthy collectors desire the same one-of-a-kind coin, price becomes secondary to possession, and values can soar beyond what most people believe possible. The lack of a mint mark on Philadelphia coins also plays a subtle role in this story, because it often led to less scrutiny during production, allowing anomalies to pass through unnoticed, only to be recognized decades later as treasures. The 1974 no-mint mark penny stands as a powerful reminder that even in an age of modern machinery and supposed precision, human error, material confusion, and experimental ambition can collide to produce miracles in metal. It tells us that history is not always clean or perfectly documented, and that sometimes the most valuable artifacts are created accidentally. Struck at high speed, spent without a thought, and forgotten until curiosity brings them back into the light. So as you think about this story and reflect on the pennies you may have handled thousands of times in your life, remember that value is not always obvious. Sometimes it hides in mistakes, sometimes it waits patiently in plain sight, and sometimes it rests quietly among ordinary coins, carrying a secret worth millions for the person who finally notices what everyone else missed. Next, 1994 no-mint mark 1 cent from the United States, a penny that most people would never look at twice. A coin that feels modern, common, and almost disposable, yet under extremely rare and specific circumstances has been associated with a mind-bending valuation of up to $11 million, a number that sounds impossible until you understand how minting transitions, experimental metals, overlooked errors, and sheer chance can transform a single cent into a life-changing discovery. The year 1994 places this coin firmly in the modern era of U.S. coinage, a time when many people assume mistakes no longer happen, yet the reality inside the U.S. Mint tells a very different story. Because even with advanced machinery, strict procedures, and improved quality control, the sheer scale of production combined with ongoing material experiments created conditions where rare and dramatic errors could still escape into circulation. And because this coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, it carries no mint mark, placing it among billions of cents produced at the highest output facility in the country, where volume itself becomes a catalyst for unnoticed anomalies. Officially, the 1994 penny was supposed to be struck on a copper-plated zinc planchet, a composition introduced in the early 1980s to reduce costs as copper prices rose. Consisting of a zinc core coated with a thin layer of copper, but the mint environment is not a perfectly sealed system, and the presence of leftover materials, test blanks, and experimental planchets creates opportunities for errors that defy official records. One of the most powerful scenarios that fuels the $11 million valuation narrative is the possibility of a wrong metal strike involving a solid bronze planchet, because while bronze cents were officially discontinued years earlier, history has already proven that a small number of post-1982 pennies were mistakenly struck on leftover bronze planchets, and those coins are among the most famous modern rarities in American numismatics. So the idea of a genuine 1994 bronze penny, especially one without a mint mark, instantly captures the imagination of collectors, because such a coin should not exist at all, and when a coin contradicts mint specifications and survives authentication, it becomes a physical challenge to history itself. Another scenario that elevates the 1994 no-mint mark cent into legendary territory is the discovery of a dramatic double die obverse or reverse, not the weak mechanical doubling caused by loose dies or vibration, but a true hub doubling created during the die-making process, resulting in bold, separated images in the date, the word liberty, the motto "I in God we trust," or the reverse lettering. A strong and unmistakable double die from 1994 would be especially shocking because collectors often associate such dramatic hub errors with earlier decades, and the later the date, the more astonishing the error becomes. And if such a coin were found in near-perfect condition with original surfaces and sharp detail, it would instantly become one of the most important modern Lincoln cents ever discovered. Then there is the electrifying possibility of an off-metal strike involving an unauthorized or experimental alloy. During the early 1990s, the U.S. Mint continued researching plating techniques, bonding methods, and alternative metals to improve durability and reduce costs, and while most experimental pieces were meant to remain within the mint, history has shown that a few sometimes escape, intentionally or otherwise, and if a 1994 no-mint mark penny were found struck on an aluminum planchet, a foreign alloyed blank, or another experimental metal never approved for circulation, the numismatic world would be shaken, because such a coin would not only be rare but historically significant, serving as tangible evidence of undocumented or poorly recorded mint experimentation. Adding to this is the rare but all-inspiring possibility of a mule error, where the obverse die of a Lincoln cent is paired with a reverse die that does not belong to it, perhaps from another denomination, an experimental reverse, or an undocumented design variation. Mule errors are among the most coveted mistakes in coin collecting because they require multiple failures in die handling and inspection. And in the modern era, such errors are considered almost impossible, which paradoxically makes them even more valuable if they are ever confirmed. The $11 million valuation also finds support in the idea of catastrophic mint errors combined with absolute uniqueness, such as a multi-struck coin where the planchet was struck multiple times at different angles, creating a layered and chaotic image that still clearly identifies the coin as a 1994 cent. Or a dramatic broad strike caused by the complete failure of the retaining collar, allowing the coin to spread outward while preserving strong design elements. These errors are already valuable on their own, but when paired with rarity, pristine condition, and the shock factor of a modern date, their value can escalate dramatically. Another fascinating angle is the possibility of an undocumented die variety or experimental hub usage, where subtle differences in lettering style, spacing, or portrait details reveal that an unapproved or test hub was used to create working dies. Such a discovery would require intense scrutiny by top experts, but once authenticated, it could redefine what collectors understand about mid-1990s mint operations and elevate the coin into a category far beyond standard era collecting. What makes the 1994 no-mint mark penny especially dangerous to overlook is that most people assume modern pennies are worthless, leading rare errors to survive unnoticed for decades in jars, rolls, and inherited collections, untouched and unexamined because no one believed there was anything worth finding. And when such a coin finally emerges, it does not quietly enter the market. It arrives as a shock, forcing collectors, dealers, and grading services to reevaluate assumptions about modern coinage. The $11 million figure becomes believable not because every 1994 penny is special, but because the right combination of impossible metal, dramatic mint error, complete uniqueness, and historical mystery can create a coin that simply cannot be replaced or replicated. At the highest levels of numismatics, collectors are not buying pennies, they are buying exclusivity, status, and the thrill of owning something that should not exist. And when two or more ultra-wealthy collectors desire the same one-of-a-kind coin, logic fades and prices can soar beyond what most people consider reasonable. The absence of a mint mark on Philadelphia coins also plays a subtle role in this story, because it often resulted in less scrutiny during production, allowing anomalies to pass through unnoticed, only to be recognized decades later as treasures. The 1994 no-mint mark 1 cent stands as a powerful reminder that even in the modern age, when technology is advanced and oversight is assumed to be flawless, human error, material confusion, and experimental ambition can still collide to create miracles in metal. It tells us that history is not always clean or perfectly documented, and that sometimes the most valuable artifacts are created accidentally, struck at high speed, spent without a thought, and forgotten until curiosity finally brings them back into the light. So as you think about this story and glance at the pennies you may have lying around right now, remember that value is not always obvious. Sometimes it hides in mistakes, sometimes it waits quietly in plain sight, and sometimes it rests among ordinary coins, carrying a secret worth millions for the person who finally notices what everyone else ignored. Next, 1975 no-mint mark 1 cent from the United States. a coin that most people have handled countless times without ever imagining it could be worth more than $16 million under the right and extraordinarily rare circumstances. And while that number may sound shocking or even unbelievable at first, by the time you reach the end of this deep dive you will understand how minting chaos, transitional confusion, experimental metals, human error, and sheer numismatic mystery can elevate a simple Lincoln cent into one of the most talked about modern coin legends in American history. The year 1975 sits right in the middle of one of the most unstable and experimental periods for U.S. coinage, a time when the mint was still grappling with the aftermath of rising metal prices, cost-cutting measures, and the relatively new copper-plated zinc composition that replaced traditional bronze cents just a few years earlier. And because this coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, it carries no mint mark, placing it among billions of cents produced at massive speed, where volume itself becomes the enemy of perfection and the breeding ground for extraordinary mistakes. Officially, the 1975 penny was intended to be struck on a copper-plated zinc planchet with a zinc core and a thin copper coating bonded to the surface. But the real environment inside the mint was far from simple. As leftover bronze planchets, experimental blanks, foreign planchets, and test materials could all exist within the same facilities, especially during periods of transition and testing. And this is where the $16 million legend truly begins to take shape. One of the most powerful and widely discussed possibilities that could justify such an extreme valuation is the existence of a 1975 no-mint mark penny struck on a solid bronze planchet. A transitional error that directly violates official mint specifications, because by 1975 bronze cents were not supposed to be produced at all. And yet history has already shown us that post-transition bronze cents do exist from other years, proving that leftover materials were sometimes mistakenly fed into presses, and a genuine 1975 bronze cent, especially one confirmed as authentic and original, would instantly rank among the rarest modern U.S. coins ever discovered, particularly if it were unique or one of only a handful known, pushing its value far beyond conventional price guides and into the realm of legendary artifacts. Another scenario that fuels the $16 million valuation is the possibility of a dramatic and unmistakable double die error, not the weak and misleading machine doubling that results from loose equipment or vibration, but a true hub doubling created during the die-making process itself, resulting in bold, clearly separated images in the date, the word liberty, the motto "I in God we trust," or the reverse lettering. A strong double die from 1975 would be especially electrifying because collectors typically associate such spectacular errors with earlier decades, and the later the date of the coin, the more shocking and desirable the error becomes. And if such a coin were found with sharp detail, original surfaces, and minimal wear, competition among high-end collectors could easily push the price into multi-million-dollar territory. Then there is the breathtaking possibility of a wrong metal strike involving an experimental or unauthorized alloy. During the mid-1970s, the U.S. Mint actively tested alternative materials including aluminum and other lightweight metals in response to ongoing cost pressures, and while these test pieces were supposed to remain tightly controlled, numismatic history has proven that some experimental strikes escaped into private hands, either accidentally or through gaps in documentation. And if a 1975 no-mint mark Lincoln cent were discovered struck on an aluminum planchet or another experimental metal never approved for circulation, the discovery would send shockwaves through the collecting world, because such a coin would not only be rare but historically explosive, serving as physical evidence of a hidden or poorly documented chapter in mint experimentation, attracting attention from museums, historians, and elite collectors worldwide. Adding to this is the rare but awe-inspiring possibility of a mule error, where the obverse die of a Lincoln cent is paired with a reverse die that does not belong to it, perhaps from another denomination, an experimental design, or an undocumented reverse variety. Mule errors are among the rarest and most dramatic mistakes in coin collecting because they require multiple failures in die handling, inspection, and quality control, and the fact that such an error could occur in 1975, well into the era of modern minting procedures, would make it almost unbelievable and therefore extraordinarily valuable. The $16 million figure also finds justification in the idea of catastrophic mint errors combined with complete uniqueness, such as a multi-struck coin where the planchet was struck multiple times at different angles, creating a chaotic yet mesmerizing image that still clearly identifies the coin as a 1975 cent, or a massive broad strike caused by the total failure of the retaining collar, allowing the coin to expand far beyond its normal diameter while retaining strong design elements. These types of errors are already highly collectible, but when paired with extreme rarity, visual impact, and near-perfect preservation, their value can escalate beyond what most people would consider possible for a modern penny. Another fascinating angle is the potential discovery of an undocumented die variety or experimental hub usage, where subtle differences in lettering style, spacing, portrait detail, or reverse design elements reveal that an unapproved or test hub was used to create working dies. Such a discovery would require extensive expert analysis and authentication, but once confirmed it could fundamentally change what collectors understand about mid-1970s mint operations, placing the coin in a category of its own, far removed from standard circulation issues. What makes the 1975 no-mint mark penny particularly dangerous to overlook is the widespread assumption that modern pennies are worthless. An assumption that allows rare and extraordinary errors to survive unnoticed for decades, sitting quietly in jars, rolls, old coffee cans, or inherited collections, untouched and unexamined because no one believed there was anything worth finding. And when such a coin finally emerges, it does not enter the market quietly or politely. It arrives like a thunderclap, forcing collectors, dealers, grading services, and historians to reevaluate long-held assumptions about modern U.S. coinage. The $16 million valuation becomes believable not because every 1975 penny is special, but because the right combination of impossible metal, dramatic mint error, total uniqueness, and historical mystery can create a coin that simply cannot be replaced or duplicated. At the highest levels of numismatics, collectors are not buying pennies or even errors, they are buying exclusivity, legacy, and the prestige of owning something that should not exist. And when two or more ultra-wealthy collectors desire the same one-of-a-kind artifact, logic fades into the background and price becomes whatever it needs to be to secure ownership. The absence of a mint mark on Philadelphia coins also plays a subtle but important role in this story, because it often resulted in less scrutiny during production compared to branch mint issues, allowing anomalies to pass through unnoticed, only to be recognized decades later as treasures. The 1975 no-mint mark 1 cent stands as a powerful reminder that even in an era of advanced machinery and supposed precision, human error, material confusion, and experimental ambition can still collide to create miracles in metal. It reminds us that history is not always perfectly recorded, that official documents do not always tell the full story, and that sometimes the most valuable artifacts are created accidentally, struck at high speed, spent without a thought, and forgotten until curiosity, knowledge, and careful observation finally bring them back into the light. So as you think about this story and glance at the pennies you may have lying around right now, remember that value is not always obvious. Sometimes it hides in mistakes, sometimes it waits patiently in plain sight, and sometimes it rests quietly among ordinary coins, carrying a secret worth millions for the one person who finally notices what everyone else ignored. Next, 2002 no-mint mark 1 cent from the United States, a penny that most people consider completely ordinary, modern, and almost worthless, yet under extraordinarily rare circumstances has been discussed as a coin that could reach a staggering value of up to $6 million, a number that seems unbelievable until you understand how modern minting pressure, experimental processes, die errors, and rare transitional anomalies can transform a simple Lincoln cent into a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. The year 2002 places this coin firmly in the modern era of U.S. coinage, a time when many collectors assume that major mistakes no longer happen, but the reality inside the U.S. Mint tells a very different story, because even with advanced technology, computerized systems, and tighter inspection standards, the sheer volume of coins produced each year combined with ongoing experimentation and human oversight still creates opportunities for rare and dramatic errors to slip through unnoticed, and because this coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, it carries no mint mark, placing it among billions of cents produced at the nation's primary facility, where speed and volume can quietly overwhelm even the best quality control systems. Officially, the 2002 penny was struck on a copper-plated zinc planchet, a composition that had been standard for 2 decades by that point. Consisting of a zinc core bonded to a thin copper coating, yet despite this apparent consistency, the mint environment is never completely isolated, and the presence of leftover materials, rejected blanks, test planchets, and experimental strips creates the possibility for coins that should not exist according to official records. One of the most compelling scenarios that could elevate a 2002 no-mint mark cent into the $6 million range is the existence of a wrong planchet error involving a solid bronze blank, because although bronze cents were officially discontinued long before 2002, history has already proven that a very small number of post-transition bronze cents exist, and those coins are among the most famous modern rarities in U.S. numismatics, so the hypothetical discovery of a genuine 2002 bronze penny, especially one authenticated by top grading services and confirmed as unaltered, would instantly become a landmark discovery, challenging long-held assumptions about mint operations and sending shockwaves through the collecting community, another powerful factor. Behind the $6 million legend is the possibility of a dramatic and unmistakable double die error, not the common mechanical doubling caused by die bounce or loose equipment, but a true hub doubling created during the die-making process, resulting in strong, separated images in the date, the word liberty, the motto I in God we trust, or the reverse lettering. A bold double die from 2002 would be especially shocking because collectors associate such dramatic hub errors with earlier decades. And the later the date, the more astonishing and valuable the error becomes, particularly if the coin were discovered in pristine condition with original surfaces and sharp detail. Then there is the electrifying possibility of an off-metal strike involving an unauthorized or experimental alloy. During the late 1990s and early 2000s, the U.S. Mint continued refining plating techniques, testing bonding durability, and experimenting with different metal treatments to improve coin longevity and reduce long-term costs. And while most experimental pieces were meant to remain within controlled environments, history has shown that a few sometimes escape, intentionally or accidentally, and if a 2002 no-mint mark Lincoln cent were found struck on aluminum, a foreign alloy, or another experimental metal never approved for circulation, it would immediately become one of the most important modern mint era discoveries ever recorded, not only as a collectible but as physical evidence of undocumented or poorly recorded mint experimentation, attracting attention from museums, historians, and elite collectors around the world. Adding to this is the rare but breathtaking possibility of a mule error, where the obverse die of a Lincoln cent is paired with a reverse die that does not belong to it, perhaps from another denomination, an experimental reverse design, or an undocumented die variety. Mule errors are among the rarest and most dramatic mistakes in all of numismatics because they require multiple simultaneous failures in die handling, labeling, and inspection, and the idea of such an error occurring as late as 2002 makes it almost unthinkable, which is exactly why its value could soar into the multi-million-dollar range if confirmed. The $6 million valuation is also supported by the possibility of catastrophic mint errors combined with absolute uniqueness, such as a multi-struck coin where the planchet was struck several times at different angles, creating a chaotic yet mesmerizing design that still clearly identifies the coin as a 2002 cent, or a dramatic broad strike caused by the complete failure of the retaining collar, allowing the coin to expand outward while preserving strong design elements. These errors are already valuable on their own, but when paired with rarity, visual impact, and the shock factor of a modern date, their value can multiply dramatically. Another intriguing angle is the potential discovery of an undocumented die variety, or experimental hub usage, where subtle but undeniable differences in lettering, spacing, portrait detail, or reverse design elements indicate that an unapproved or test hub was used to create working dies. Such a discovery would require extensive expert analysis and authentication, but once confirmed it could redefine what collectors understand about early 2000s mint operations, placing the coin in a category far beyond normal circulation issues. What makes the 2002 no-mint mark penny especially dangerous to overlook is the widespread belief that modern pennies are completely worthless, an assumption that allows rare and extraordinary errors to survive unnoticed for decades in jars, rolls, and inherited collections, untouched and unexamined because no one believes there is anything worth finding, and when such a coin finally surfaces, it does not quietly enter the market. It arrives as a shock that forces collectors, dealers, grading services, and historians to reevaluate long-held beliefs about modern U.S. coinage. The $6 million figure becomes plausible not because every 2002 penny is valuable, but because the right combination of impossible metal, dramatic mint error, total uniqueness, and historical mystery can create a coin that simply cannot be replaced, duplicated, or fully explained. At the highest levels of numismatics, collectors are not buying pennies or even errors. They are buying exclusivity, legacy, and the prestige of owning something that should not exist. And when two or more ultra-wealthy collectors desire the same one-of-a-kind artifact, price becomes secondary to possession. The absence of a mint mark on Philadelphia coins also plays a subtle role in this story, because it often resulted in less scrutiny during production, allowing anomalies to pass through unnoticed only to be recognized years later as treasures. The 2002 no mint mark 1 cent stands as a powerful reminder that even in the modern age of advanced machines and digital oversight, human error, material confusion, and experimental ambition can still collide to create miracles in metal. It tells us that history is not always perfectly documented, that official mint records do not always tell the full story, and that sometimes the most valuable artifacts are created accidentally, struck at high speed, spent without a second thought, and forgotten until curiosity, knowledge, and careful observation finally bring them back into the light. So as you think about this story and glance at the pennies you may have lying around right now, remember that value is not always obvious. Sometimes it hides in mistakes, sometimes it waits patiently in plain sight, and sometimes it rests quietly among ordinary coins, carrying a secret worth millions for the one person who finally notices what everyone else ignored. And as we continue this journey across these 6 extraordinary Lincoln cents spanning decades from the 1970s into the early 2000s, what truly ties them together is not just their dates or their lack of mint marks, but the deeper truth they reveal about how value is born from imperfection. Because whether we are talking about the 1974 no mint mark cent whispered about at $19 million, the 1975 no mint mark cent associated with $16 million, the 1979 no mint mark cent linked to $17 million, the 1994 no mint mark cent discussed at $11 million, the 2002 no mint mark cent imagined at $6 million, or the earlier 1962 no mint mark cent surrounded by even greater legends. Every single one of these coins exists at the intersection of massive production pressure and human fallibility. And that intersection is where numismatic miracles are created. During all of these years, the Philadelphia Mint was producing cents by the billions, feeding planchets at incredible speed into presses that ran almost nonstop. And even with evolving technology, the system was never flawless, because dies cracked, hubs were misaligned, planchets were mixed, experimental materials passed through shared spaces, and inspectors were forced to prioritize speed over microscopic perfection, which meant that once in a great while a coin slipped through that should never have existed. And when such a coin survives decades without being destroyed, melted, or altered, it gains a kind of mythic power. The 1974 and 1975 cents are especially bound together by the lingering chaos of the copper crisis era, when the mint was still adapting to copper-plated zinc while quietly experimenting with alternatives, and the possibility that even one solid bronze or experimental alloy cent escaped during those years is enough to keep collectors searching relentlessly. Because a single confirmed example would instantly become a crown jewel of modern U.S. coinage, while the 1979 cent represents the dangers of complacency in high-volume production, a year when people assumed the transition was complete and nothing unusual could still happen, making any dramatic double die, mule, or off-metal strike from that year all the more shocking and desirable. The 1994 cent carries its own unique tension because it exists in a period when collectors believe quality control was already strong, which paradoxically means that any extreme error from that year challenges assumptions about modern minting and forces the market to rethink what is truly possible, and the 2002 cent pushes that boundary even further, standing as proof that even in the digital age of coin production, with sensors, computers, and refined processes, rarity can still be born, because machines are built by humans, overseen by humans, and ultimately vulnerable to human oversight and material confusion. What elevates all 6 of these coins into multi-million-dollar territory in theory is not just a single mistake, but the stacking of improbabilities, a wrong planchet combined with a dramatic strike, or an undocumented die variety paired with pristine condition, or an experimental metal error surviving untouched for decades. And when those improbabilities stack on top of one another, the result is not just a rare coin but an unrepeatable artifact, something that cannot be recreated even if the mint tried. And at that level of rarity, traditional price guides become meaningless, because value is no longer determined by past sales but by future desire, by what one collector is willing to pay to own something no one else can. History has shown time and again that when a coin reaches this level of uniqueness, wealthy collectors, investment funds, and even institutions begin to compete, not for metal content but for narrative, prestige, and legacy. Owning such a coin is not about spending money. It is about securing a place in history, and that is why numbers like 6 million, 11 million, 16 million, 17 million, or 19 million stop sounding absurd and start sounding inevitable under the right conditions. Another powerful thread connecting all 6 coins is the absence of a mint mark, a detail so small that most people ignore it completely, yet that very absence places these coins at the Philadelphia Mint, where sheer volume made subtle mistakes easier to miss. And decades later that same absence becomes a clue, a silent marker pointing collectors back to the place where the greatest number of errors could have been born. This is why jars of old pennies, bank rolls, inherited collections, and forgotten boxes remain objects of fascination, because statistically the more ordinary and overlooked a coin seemed at the time, the greater the chance it was never examined closely enough to reveal its secret, and the longer such a coin remains hidden, the more explosive its eventual discovery becomes, because rarity grows not just from scarcity but from survival through time, neglect, and ignorance. And when such a survivor finally emerges, authenticated and understood, it does not merely enter the market, it disrupts it, forcing collectors to reassess entire eras of coinage. These 6 coins together tell a single, powerful story, that value is not confined to ancient gold or colonial silver, that even modern copper-plated zinc can become legendary, that mistakes are not always flaws but sometimes the very reason an object becomes priceless, and that history is not only written by intention but also by accident, struck into metal at high speed and carried unknowingly through countless hands. So when you look at these 6 cents not as individual coins but as chapters of the same larger narrative, they become symbols of possibility, reminders that fortune does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers from the bottom of a drawer, rests quietly in a roll of change, or hides in plain sight among coins everyone else believes are worthless. And that is why the search never truly ends, because as long as coins were struck by imperfect systems and handled by imperfect people, there will always be the chance that the next life-changing discovery is already out there, waiting for the one person curious enough to look closely and patient enough to understand what they are holding. And when we push even deeper into this shared story of these 6 no-mint mark Lincoln cents, the picture becomes even more compelling because each coin does not stand alone as an isolated fantasy but instead reinforces the plausibility of the others, creating a chain of logic that collectors understand instinctively, the logic that says if it happened once it can happen again. And if it happened again it can happen quietly, unnoticed, and undocumented. For years, the U.S. Mint never operated in perfectly sealed yearly compartments. Dies were prepared in advance, planchets were shipped in bulk, rejected materials were stored and sometimes reused. Experimental work happened alongside routine production, and human beings moved all of these elements through shared physical spaces, which means that the boundary between what was supposed to happen in 1974, 1975, 1979, 1994, or 2002 and what actually happened on a single press during a single shift is far thinner than official reports suggest. This is why collectors who truly understand mint history do not laugh at the idea of a $6 million 2002 penny or a $16 million 1975 cent, because they know that rarity is not governed by dates alone but by circumstance, coincidence, and survival. The longer a coin remains hidden, the more powerful its eventual impact becomes. Because markets respond not just to rarity but to shock, and modern dates deliver shock in a way that early coins no longer can. Everyone expects an 1800s coin to be rare, but no one expects a penny from their own lifetime to rewrite price records, and that emotional jolt fuels demand in a way spreadsheets never could. Another layer that binds these coins together is condition, because the most valuable hypothetical examples are not worn, damaged pieces pulled from circulation after decades of use, but coins that somehow escaped heavy handling altogether. Perhaps pulled aside by a curious worker, saved unknowingly in a roll, or forgotten in a collection that was never spent. And when an extreme error survives with original surfaces, sharp detail, and untouched metal, it becomes exponentially more powerful, because now rarity and beauty reinforce one another. Collectors are emotional buyers at the highest level, and a coin that looks extraordinary while also being historically impossible becomes irresistible. This is especially true for wrong metal and experimental alloy errors, where weight, color, and sound immediately signal that something is wrong in the most exciting way possible, and once laboratory testing confirms the anomaly, the coin crosses a threshold from curiosity to legend. The absence of mint marks across all 6 coins also creates a psychological pattern that experienced collectors recognize. Philadelphia coins were often treated as the baseline, the default, the least glamorous issues, which meant that collectors historically focused their attention on branch mint coins with visible letters, leaving Philadelphia issues to circulate longer and receive less scrutiny. And that lack of early attention is exactly what allows rare errors to survive long enough to become truly valuable. Because once an error is discovered early, examples are often pulled quickly, documented, and capped in value by known populations. But when an error sleeps unnoticed for decades, its population remains effectively unknown. And unknown populations create limitless potential. This is why discussions of $1,000,000 valuations always center on unique, or nearly unique pieces. Because once a coin is proven to be one of one, price becomes a negotiation between desire and ego rather than supply and demand. The 1974 and 1975 cents gain additional power from their proximity to one another in time, suggesting that if a bronze or experimental planchet escaped in one year, it could just as easily have escaped in the next. While the 1979 cent represents the danger of assuming stability after transition, and the 1994 and 2002 cents serve as reminders that modernization did not eliminate error but merely changed its form, replacing crude mechanical mistakes with subtle metallurgical or dye-related anomalies that require expertise to detect. And that subtlety is exactly what keeps these coins hidden, sitting quietly among billions of ordinary cents, never triggering suspicion until someone weighs them, measures them, or notices a detail that does not quite fit. And once that moment of recognition happens, once the question is asked whether this coin should exist at all, the door to extraordinary value swings open, because numismatics is ultimately a discipline built on questions, on challenging assumptions, on asking why a coin looks, feels, or behaves differently than it should, and the people who ask those questions are the ones who make history. These 6 coins together also tell a broader cultural story about how society undervalues the everyday, how we dismiss small things as insignificant, and how that dismissal creates opportunity. Pennies are ignored, ridiculed, even abolished in conversation, and that widespread indifference is exactly what makes them the perfect hiding place for miracles. No one scrutinizes what they believe has no value, and time and again it is that belief that proves most costly, because value does not care about perception. It exists whether we acknowledge it or not, waiting patiently for the moment when knowledge catches up to reality, and that is why the legends surrounding these 6 coins refuse to die. Because they are not really about money, they are about possibility, about the idea that history can still surprise us, that systems we believe are closed are still porous, and that even now, in an age of automation and data, chance can still strike something extraordinary into the smallest piece of change. And as long as that possibility exists, as long as pennies continue to sit unnoticed in jars, drawers, and forgotten boxes, the story of these 6 no-mint mark Lincoln cents remains unfinished. stretching forward into the future, waiting for the next discovery to add another chapter to a narrative that reminds us that fortune often hides where no one thinks to look.